While the majority of the Halo media is based on the 26th century, the universe behind the games spans hundreds of thousands of years. So with this, I'm going to attempt to sum up the entire story into a short, easily digestible video, bringing us to the current timeline in the story as of the end of Halo 5 Guardians. Over 10 million years ago, an advanced civilization known as the Precursors controlled the galaxy. Having reigned for billions of years and reaching the pinnacle of technological advancement, they seeded the galaxy with life and created many species, including humans and Forerunners. The Precursors held the mantle of responsibility, the guardianship of all life in the galaxy, and they decided it was time to pass the mantle down to one of their creations. Initially it was the Forerunners who were selected, but over time, the Precursors changed their minds and handed it to humanity instead. This angered the Forerunners, and they went on to declare war on the Precursors. Although they were considerably more advanced, the Precursors, taken by surprise, were almost completely wiped out. Some of the Precursors survived by transforming themselves into a molecular dust that they would be able to use to regenerate themselves sometime in the future. But after millions of years, this dust would become corrupted and infected. Those who came into contact with it would mutate. This was the beginning of the Parasitic Flood. Ancient humanity stumbled across the flood parasite near the galaxy's edges. Hundreds of human planets were quickly lost to the parasite. Humanity, desperate to stop the spread, started sterilizing their own planets to slow its advancement, all while securing more colonies for their populations to relocate to. Unfortunately, this aggressive expansion towards Forerunner territory was perceived as an act of war. Humanity was now in a two-front war against the Flood and the Forerunners. Despite this, humanity was eventually able to push the Flood out of the galaxy. However, the Forerunners, led by the Supreme Commander known as the Didact, dismantled humanity's civilization and eventually emerged victorious. Humanity was regressed to a hunter-gatherer level species and was exiled to their homeworld, Earth, where they would essentially start over. The Flood resurface, and for the first time, the Forerunners make contact with them, resulting in a war that lasts for centuries. Many Forerunner planets have been overwhelmed by the Flood. They decide that the only way to stop the complete infection of the galaxy is to remove its food source and end all known sentient life. The Forerunners create a superweapon called the Halo Array, which is a network of enormous rings throughout the galaxy. The DNA of each species would be stored, so that after the cleansing of the Flood from the system, planets could be reseeded and begin once again. This weapon was a success. Once fired, all beings within the array's effective range, including the Forerunners themselves, were wiped out. Almost 100,000 years later, the Sangshayum and the Sangheili spent years locked in a bitter war over the control of the remains of the Forerunners. The Prophets wished to use this technology to search and explore the galaxy, but the elites believed such usage to be a desecration of their holy artifacts. Eventually, the two species formed an alliance that would be known for centuries to come as the Covenant. Over time, many other species would be absorbed into their ranks. Modern humankind began colonizing the solar system, creating settlements on the Moon and Mars, as well as various asteroids and moons of Jupiter. Governments and factions fight for control of Earth and its early colonies. Overpopulation and disorder on Earth begin to mount. The United Nations Space Command is created to deal with the growing rebellions spanning the solar system. Eventually treaties are signed, and the interplanetary wars end. A united Earth government is formed, but they are now facing problems of overpopulation, famine, and economic instability caused by the wars. With now over 800 settled worlds across the Milky Way galaxy, humanity's golden age of expansion was about to come to an end. But with its rapid spread, the outer, less wealthy colonies began to feel isolated. Laws and taxes set up by the United Earth governments were causing dissent and instability against the centralized Earth government. Outer colonies were feeling like it was becoming their role to work hard and live in squalor in order for the wealthy inner colonies to continue their more luxurious lifestyles. This eventually led to the Insurrection, an undeclared civil war between the UNSC and the various rebel groups that rose up against it. The Insurrection led to the UNSC to create the Spartan 2 project. This program would take 75 physically and mentally gifted children into rigorous training and physical augmentations through surgical and medical means. These super soldiers, codenamed Spartans, were given the task of squashing the rebellion. Because time was a factor, but also the need to maintain secrecy around the program, these 75 children were kidnapped and replaced with flesh clones who would die shortly after. Once the children had met physical maturity, the biological augmentation process would begin. This part of the program was tough, and almost immediately 30 of them died as a result of the procedure, with a further 12 of the candidates being left permanently crippled. First contact between humanity and the Covenant is made. The prophets discover that the humans were pretty much the living heirs to the ones the Covenant worship as gods, the Forerunners. Realizing that this will pose a threat to their authority as well as their religion, they hide the truth from the rest of the Covenant and call for the complete destruction of all humanity, claiming that humans had committed unforgivable offenses against the gods. The Human Covenant War begins. The Spartan 3 project is begun in secret. This time the children experimented on are orphans from worlds who have been attacked by the Covenant and are considered expendable. The artificial intelligence Cortana is created, cloned from the brain of the Spartan 2 program creator Dr. Catherine Halsey. The Covenant invade Reach, one of humanity's most populated planets. The Spartans of Noble Team help a UNSC ship, the Pillar of Autumn, escape. The ship carries the AI known as Cortana, who holds information from an ancient artifact. The Pillar of Autumn crashes onto one of the Forerunner's halo arrays, and a sample of the Flood kept in quarantine is awakened. To stop the Flood and prevent the halo array from being activated, Spartan John 117, Master Chief, destroys the ring. The Covenant go on to invade Earth, but are stopped by the UNSC. While fleeing, Master Chief, with Cortana aboard the UNSC ship in amber clad, decides to follow them to another Halo installation that the Covenant are planning to activate. Along with a disgraced member of the Covenant, known as the Arbiter, Chief once again puts a stop to the Covenant plans. A device known as the Forerunner Arc is discovered on Earth. This installation is used to control the Halo arrays. The Covenant, UNSC, and the Flood all fight for control. But Cortana arrives via a portal that leads to another arc beyond the limits of the galaxy. She leads Master Chief through the portal, followed by the Flood, along with a number of Covenant. Cortana has constructed a new halo there, which Master Chief uses to destroy the arc and those on it before leaving on the ship, forward into dawn. But while escaping, the ship is torn in half, and both the Master Chief and Cortana are set adrift throughout space. A truce brings an end to the Human Covenant War. A planet called Requiem draws the remnants of the Forward into Dawn into its orbit. Cortana is now suffering from rampancy, which is a condition that begins to affect AI who live beyond their normal lifespan. This former Forerunner planet is home to a general called the Didact, who's been held there in suspended animation. Having drifted through space for over 4 years, Cortana notices that the ship's intruder alarms have been activated and wakes the Chief from cryosleep. After crash landing on the planet, the Chief and Cortana are engaged by the occupying Covenant forces who have refused to disarm and continues to declare war on humanity. After the Didact awoke, the Covenant group swears allegiance to him. The Didact plans to use the Composer, a machine that translates an organic being's mental content into machine data, to attack Earth and grows Promethean army. The Master Chief follows him in close pursuit, but the Didact was too powerful for the Master Chief. However, Cortana, nearing the end of her life, uses the last of her strength to immobilize him, and it was during this time that the Chief was able to disable the Didact with a pulse grenade, sending him falling into a slip-space rupture beneath the Composer. Cortana was able to save the Master Chief from the subsequent blast that was used to destroy the Composer. Cortana then begins to fade away. Floating around space, the Chief is later recovered by the UNSC Infinity. Cortana was still within the Didact's ship when it was destroyed by the Master Chief. What was left of the ship enacted an emergency slipspace jump and came out near Genesis, where Cortana discovered the domain. After accessing the domain, she was able to stop her rampancy and gain control of all Forerunner assets. She begins to awaken the Guardians, powerful Forerunner AIs, as a way of forcibly bringing peace to the galaxy. She essentially assumes the mantle of responsibility. The Master Chief was supposed to return home, but after receiving a message from Cortana, he had hoped that he could find her. Requesting permission to retrieve her, he was denied. But the Chief disobeys orders and sets off with Blue Team to find Cortana. Having gone AWOL, Spartan Fire Team Osiris was sent to bring them back to the United Nations Space Command. However, after finding out the truth about Cortana and the Guardians, they realized Blue Team would need help. AI from across the galaxy begins swearing allegiance to Cortana and her plans. She arrives on Earth with one of her Guardians, and uses its EMP to shut down most of the planet's power and defenses, but not before the Infinity flees Earth's orbit. It would appear that the UNSC and Earth has been forced back into the Dark Ages. And this is where it can be assumed that the story will continue on to Halo Infinite. I'm a massive Halo fan. Although I've played everything in the franchise, I put an obsessive amount of time into Halo 3. So when it was suggested by a number of people that I consider exploring the enormous Halo universe, I jumped at the idea. I'm not sure how well this will be received, but I'm going to give it an honest shot, even if just for my own interests. But please, let me know what you think. This has obviously just been an overly shortened version of the story up until now, but I'm really keen to start working through some of the depth the story has to offer. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!